In the event of his burning and dismemberment, Darth Vader truly lost a significant portion of his power that he once held as the Chosen One. The amount of midichlorians lost from his organic limbs cut him down to only 80% of the power of the Emperor, and forever barred him from reaching the full extent of the destined true ability of Anakin. As we've explored before, there were many things Vader could have done to either boost his power, or at least make his clunky suit easier to deal with. We've talked about how he could have moved to an upgraded suit that would have returned him to full range of mobility, but that Vader feared the operation of doing so would kill him. He also even tried to repair his organ tissue through dark-side healing and meditation, but failed because of the elation from being able to breathe freely and this interrupting his focus. Just about anything Vader tried to do to return himself to a facsimile of his old body ended in complete failure. But there was one thing that Vader never tried. That was cloning his own limbs. The Empire certainly had the facilities to make it happen, and he still had plenty of living tissue to work with. So why did Darth Vader not simply clone himself a new pair of legs and 2 arms? Well, my friends, today we are going to open up a holocron and talk about the complications that come with cloning Force sensitives, along with the complex history of the successful Force sensitive clones. So, let us begin. Before we open the holocron though, we have received the vision that many of the individuals that are using our star maps and holocrons have not yet subscribed. So if you find the content that we're producing enjoyable, we would be honored if you would join us. The idea of cloning Force sensitives was something explored a handful of times in both Legends and canon, but the bottom line that persists in both continuities is that this process is extremely difficult. The most recent example of cloning a Force sensitive was Moff Gideon's Force-attuned clones in The Mandalorian. We learned in Season 2 that Gideon had been running experiments on trying to either input midichlorians into existing subjects, or implanting them into his genetic DNA and new clones. Using Grogu's blood, they tried to create artificial Force sensitives. In just about every case, the Imperial scientists reported catastrophic failures though. The bodies of non-Force sensitives rejected the midichlorians so violently that it actually killed them. All clones that tried to be genetically modified with more midichlorians would die before they reached maturity. Even though Gideon claimed to have succeeded in this in the 3rd season of The Mandalorian, it is not guaranteed that Gideon's bodies would have ever been stable at all. The big problem here is obviously the Force itself and its interactions with artificial life and natural life. A Kaminoan scientist by the name of Nikkei Vance became interested in the field of this study for a period of time, and wanted to figure out how to clone Force sensitives. It was his professional opinion that the Force rejected cloned bodies. While not Force sensitive himself, he did have a good idea of how midichlorians functioned, and after many failures, he deemed the process impossible because of the will of the Force. One man who attempted to override the will of the Force was famously Darth Plagueis, who experienced similar complications when he tried creating a Force sensitive of his own. Influencing the midichlorians was in no way a straightforward process, even for the extremely powerful Sith Lord. The process took Plagueis 20 years to perfect and to learn how to influence the midichlorians, and even then, his research notes indicate that he was never successful in implanting Force sensitivity within a non-Force sensitive. However, this didn't stop many Imperial cloners and even Kaminoans from trying this out of pure curiosity. Eventually, some of them would actually nearly be successful. The issue with the midichlorians is that they are purely natural in occurrence with a will of their own. They're not like chromosomes, which can be switched around. In the case where the clones of Force sensitives did not die, they were nigh unstable, mentally deranged, or physically deformed monsters, although they could touch the Force to some degree. For all of these reasons though, Vader never bothered with trying to clone himself new limbs and have them surgically implanted. He feared the results could be catastrophic, and the process was too much of a hassle, and he didn't feel like being the guinea pig that he already felt like he was. Interestingly, this could also be the reason why Palpatine never bothered trying to just clone Anakin and make himself a new apprentice with the same Force sensitivity. Had Sidious tried to clone Anakin, it likely would have been similar to the Starkiller project, with the clone going rogue and being uncontrollable, although the clone could touch the Force. Besides though, the Emperor was far too concerned with keeping his own reign going, so all of this research was being funneled into cloning his own body, not someone else's. Of course, in this pursuit, Palpatine was rarely successful, and while Vader feared what the repercussions could be if he even attempted to clone his limbs, how the Force could actually make him more deranged, in a sense infecting him, Palpatine was successful. But with this, who were some of the other individuals that were successful at cloning Force sensitivity? To our current knowledge, there have been 8 instances of a successful Force-sensitive clone. We aren't going to count Moff Gideon's clones as of right now, as we have no proof of their condition. The first would be Palpatine's own cloned bodies, using laboratories located in his stronghold on the world of Biss, or Exegol in canon. Palpatine successfully merged cloning technology with Sith sorcery and created his own stable bodies. In the Dark Empire series, Sidious would use dark transfer to move his consciousness and spirit into a much younger and stronger version of himself. He did this quite frequently, as each of the cloned bodies were essentially perfect, and Sidious had unlocked the secret to using Sith alchemy. The reason this worked is that Sith alchemy was already known for disrupting the natural order and being an affront to the Force. The next would be Starkiller. In this case, Vader had actually become interested in the cloning process, and he had become somewhat obsessed with his old apprentice, with the Dark Lord becoming obsessed with Galen after he died. Keeping his body frozen, Vader used Merrick's DNA to create a more obedient clone, and it was noted that Vader failed hundreds of times before finally succeeding twice. The first was Subject 1138. However, he was deemed defective because he had become obsessed with Merrick's old memories and feelings. He went rogue, escaped Camino, and journeyed through the galaxy to find his old lover, Juno. The second clone was an amendment of this and was simply known as the Dark Apprentice. This clone was created without the memories of his template and had no feelings towards his past life. In the end, it would be these visions of this Dark Apprentice which would cause Starkiller 1138 to spare him. The next successful clones would be X1 and X2, and we have a full holocron coming out soon on these two Force-sensitive individuals, so we'll keep this section very brief. But be sure to check back for that holocron as things get pretty insane. During the time when the Kaminoans wanted to pursue the idea of cloning Force-sensitives, they would take the DNA from the Jedi Knight, Fallon Gray, doing so without him knowing. And for the first time, the Kaminoans were successful and created clones which they named X1 and X2. In order to keep them hidden, they shipped them off with the rest of the Grand Army, with the Kaminoans hoping that they would remain undetected. The rest of the story, as I said, gets pretty insane, so be sure to check back for that video. Next would be Joruus C'baoth, but this one is a bit iffy. Joruus C'baoth was indeed stable enough in his own body and his powers. However, his powers drove him insane. It was Palpatine who had cloned the Jedi Master during the Clone Wars, and kept him away and out of view in the Outer Rim, stowing him on the world of Wayland. The clone was tasked with guarding Wayland, as that is where the Emperor kept many of his dark secrets. Joruus believed that he had in fact been the real Jedi Master, and that he was cloned after the fact, convincing himself that he was not the clone. He would constantly refer to himself as Jedi Master, and paraded around with great pride, using the Force to dominate all around him so that they would be forced to worship him. He lost his mind, and would eventually use the dark side of the Force to subject all of his people into serving him, dominating their minds and erasing their memories. Joruus proved to be one of the most powerful Force-sensitive clones in all of creation, and appeared to have perhaps grown beyond the original Jedi that he was cloned from. Joruus wanted to recreate the Jedi Order in his own image, and stop Luke at all costs, as Joruus would eventually become obsessed with the young Skywalker. And last of the Force-sensitive clones, we wanted to mention Supreme Leader Snoke, who was cloned from Luke Skywalker's severed hand. This clone falls into the category of being physically deformed, but using Skywalker DNA made him extremely naturally powerful, able to look into others' minds, use Force lightning, and telekinetically influence people from other ships like Vader could. Palpatine had even made several bodies of Snoke, but he was mostly just a puppet. And the final clone we have to mention would be Saw Qus, one of the Emperor's hands. Saw Qus played a part in the aftermath of Order 66 in hunting down straggling Jedi. He was so loyal to Sidious and did everything that was asked of him that the Emperor would soon send Saw Qus to kill Vader, but the entire time it was meant as a suicide mission. Sidious wanted to test Vader, but Qus gave it his all, and Vader easily defeated the hand, but he was impressed with his loyalty. Because of that, he had swabbed Saw Qus of DNA before Vader decapitated him. Several clones of SOUNDCLOUD would be produced to serve the Emperor and trained under another hand by the name of Shayvon. However, all these clones would soon be led into a revolt against the Emperor about a year later. Ironic considering the reason Vader had him cloned in the first place was because of his insane loyalty. In the end, both Shayvon and all of the clones of QS were crushed during the rebellion, and they all died. At the hand, of course personally, of Lord Vader. And that, my friends, is a catalog of the all-successful Force-sensitive clones. Each of them had their own issues, all of which usually came down to the fact that the Force does not interact well with artificial beings. In the end, Vader didn't clone himself or his limbs for the simple fact that the Force could easily turn against him, and while trying to channel his power through these artificial limbs, it legitimately could have backfired and killed the Dark Lord, viewing it as massively disrespectful. That is why Vader was always fearful of cloning his own limbs. And of all the methods to gain back the power that he lost on Mustafar, this is one of the ones that went the quickest. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this? Do you think Vader should have at least tried? And what are your thoughts concerning the Force-sensitive clones that were successful? Again, stay tuned for more of our videos on X1 and X2, and let us know in the comments down below other Star Wars topics that you would like to see explored. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and have an amazing day.